Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carrington-Russell, Australian award-winning author of contemporary romance and kick-butt heroines in dark fantasy worlds. And I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking USA Today, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal author with over 40 books published. Known as the Queen of Swoon, and for books such as With Me in Seattle and Romancing Manhattan, we are talking to the one and only Kristen Proby. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Yeah, much better now that you're on. I'm so excited for
Oh.
this interview because you've just accomplished so many things. And I know, like, it always looks like from an outside world and success. So I'm really curious to see all the hard work that has gone in from when you started and in between. So can you take us back to the start, why you started writing and what publishing looked like for the first time?
Sure. So I've never not been a writer, so I don't remember a time before telling stories my whole life. But I really got serious about writing romance when I was in my early 20s. And that would have been in a long time ago. I don't know, around the turn of the century. It sounds so horrible. The century. I was writing romance and seeking out other authors to get feedback from and that sort of thing. And then life kind of got in the way, marriage and divorce and all the things that go with in the middle. So I didn't pursue publishing for a while. I did submit works to editors and agents, and I was always, no, thank you. No, thanks. Probably rightfully so at the time because I needed to practice a little bit more. And then in 2012, I have a cousin who self-published on Amazon. And I said, wait a second, how did you do that? And he was so nice enough to walk me through it. And because it had always been a bucket list thing for me to just publish a book, have more than my mother read it. And that was about it. I thought it would just be that one book. And actually, here we are 70 plus more. I need to update that bio. Uh, so ended up writing Come Away With Me in the summer of 2012 and published it in November of that year and was able to quit my day job in January. And here I am 10 years later, still doing what I love. So yeah.
How did you find that in 2 months being able to go from publish first book to then having this as a full-time business? How did you go with that?
It was really a leap of faith. Maybe I was really naive and kind of silly at the time, but I hated my day job with a passion, actually, and really loved once I dove in that summer where I was like, okay, I'm really gonna get really serious now. And I also just absorbed myself into the community. 10 years ago, it looked very different than it does now. It was quite a bit smaller. And, I just really started reaching out to bloggers, reviewers, other authors, and read a lot of books, and kind of absorbed myself into that community. I also think it was timing for me. 50 Shades of Grey was very popular on the scene, and romance has been around forever, and there's always books to read in romance, and there have been for many, many years. But I think when it came to that spicier romance, there wasn't a ton that resembled that look and that genre. And so yeah, I think it was a lot of timing. And I just reached for it and I was like, yes, this is mine. I'll take it.
I love that leap of faith as well because you really backed yourself up. And whether it was naive or whether it was like, and I say that because I did the same thing. So I'm just like, whether it's naivety or whether it's just chasing that dream and knowing no matter what, everything is going to be okay. And I love that. But then obviously it comes to being in the industry now for over 10 years, or publishing, should I say, the industry changes a lot. So I'm sure there were a lot of changes along the way. When did you start noticing a massive momentum, I want to say, in readership and that you had to change perhaps like what your, I don't want to say business model because that sounds like really gross, but when you had to change what you were doing a little bit, because I think in the first year or two, a lot of authors are just writing so many books because you get so passionate about it, you're so excited about it. And then once you get to that year or two, you realize things have to change slightly because you're going too hard too fast, you can't continue at this pace, or you have to change some things that you're marketing, or you have to start marketing, things like that. When was that momentum change for you?
Well, I mean, we get to slow down because I feel like I've just been 10 years of like writing my butt off. But I would say probably after the third or fourth book, I knew I needed a publicist and I needed help with reaching new readers. And I just needed help with the business side of things because I couldn't keep up with it like I was able to in the very beginning. So it was probably 6 to 8 months in when I decided I need help with this. But also, I have to say, the readership in the beginning, it was hundreds of thousands of books that were being sold very, very quickly in a way that it just doesn't happen now. Unfortunately, I wish for all of us that it did work that way still. So I would say probably about 5 years in, I discovered things were starting to slow down. Things were slowing down with the voraciousness of the books that were being sold. Also, we were seeing an influx of new authors coming. So fewer readers, more writers, and then you have to start to think, okay, strategy's got to change now. Are we changing covers? Are we looking at different, all the different strategy changes that come in? And that really started happening in about 2017. There was a huge shift in 2017 with even the way the New York Times looked at romance and whether or not they thought it was appropriate to acknowledge hard work, to say the least. So, that shift I really saw in 2017, and I don't think it's changed since then. We're about 6 years in and it's still similar to that, but always ups and downs. And then of course came TikTok and it's changing again. So
I really love having this conversation with authors who have been in it for over a decade now, because as a lot of people on here already know, so I started publishing in 2014, so very close to. And
yeah.
it's crazy how much the industry has changed. And I reflect a lot back on at the starting of that point, obviously you were already a couple of years in, that it almost felt more organic as when it came to readership and that connection and the blogging and the Facebook party takeovers and things like that. There was a lot more personal connection, whereas now it's just changed and evolved so much. So were you ever disheartened in the direction that it was changing, or you felt like perhaps you weren't keeping up with it or anything like that? And what were some of the conversations that you had with yourself that's like, just stick with it because this is what you're meant for?
Daily. Oh yeah, I have imposter syndrome daily. Because it's true, each time you publish and maybe you hit Wall Street Journal, and that's wonderful and it's an honor, but now I got to do it all over again. It's each time you're proving yourself with each release, and it's a lot of pressure. I think trying to keep up with everything it's hard, and it definitely, like you said, it is not as organic as it once was. Yeah, trying to find those readers that are going to be excited about your work. And also something that I've discovered in the last year or so, and I think it is with this, excitement around TikTok, readers who are in their 20s now, they didn't read my books 10 years ago. Well, they shouldn't have been. So now I'm trying to find those 20 somethings or early 30 somethings who 10 years ago were not reading my books. However, now they probably would really enjoy them. And it's looking for that whole new readership again.
One thing that I love reading it's in your bio, it's in your website, but you come from a small town in Montana. And so you obviously writing spicy romance. I'm curious as to how you went with that. Did you have any, I don't know, like um fear or you didn't want people to find out? I don't know. Or were you just straight out of the gate ready to be like, these are my books and they're the best?
Yeah, I've never had an issue with wanting to hide what I do, because mostly I was like, yeah, you can make fun of me all the way to the bank. I don't care what you have to say about what I write. It's not inappropriate. There's nothing wrong with what I do. Um, I will say, yes, of course, I live in a small town and I get comments sometimes where they're just not always kind. But these are people who have known me my whole life. And I think they just feel comfortable enough to say stuff that I'm like, just go talk about me behind my back like everybody else. Like, just there's no need to talk about this. But no, it just wasn't ever a concern for me because I just love it so much. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
And the reason why I asked that question was because I was in a small town as well, especially when I released my book. So, well, my first book, should I say? I'm in the city now. I'm a city girl now. But how did you go at the start? Because in a small town, there's not a lot of other authors or sometimes even creatives. So, how did you find fellow authors and communities where you could share those experiences and knowledge? What was the best source for you?
It's all mostly online for me. I don't have an in-person community that I meet with or anything like that. Everything is online. And, it's really the biggest reason that I go to signing events because I get to see other authors and people that get what we do and we can have conversations about that. Um, and this year I am going to a couple of even just author retreats where I can sit around with what I consider to be coworkers and discuss work because it doesn't happen very often.
I think it is a common thing for a lot of people that there aren't many, unless you are in a bigger city, there aren't many surrounding us, which is why, there are so many Facebook groups. I know that a lot of people use Discord, and now more than ever, we are accessible almost everywhere. So I would highly recommend connecting in those Facebook groups and just finding the ones that work for you. And you'll
Yeah.
definitely meet some people along the way.
Yeah, you'll totally meet your people.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about your new release, Chapel Bend.
Okay.
What?
I happen to have one right here.
Oh, it's such a pretty cover. I love that.
Thank you. I love it too.
So tell us about it. What for those who haven't yet read it, what is it about and where'd you get the inspiration?
So Chapel Bend is the third book in my Huckleberry Bay series, and it is a small town series set in a fictional little tiny town on the Oregon coast, which is my happy place. I love the Oregon coast. And this is totally an enemies to lovers kind of situation. We actually meet this couple in the first book. And of course, throughout the series, they are doing this a lot, which I think is a lot of fun. And I don't want to give too much away, but she owns a construction company and he's an electrician. And so she is renovating a chapel into a home for herself. And he is the electrician that's going to be working on her home. And it really irritates her that he is the best electrician for the job because she would rather not have to work with him, but it's okay. And yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. This series is a lot of fun because I've been able to play with, there's a resident ghost in town, and there's all kinds of characters, side characters. I think sometimes make a series for me when you see them throughout the books. And yeah, so I really love this series. And I actually dedicated this book to myself because I enjoyed every moment of writing this book. It was pure joy for me. I loved it so much.
What does your writing process look like? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Do you have to light a candle, sing kumbaya? What is your
Sing Kumbaya, I don't sing. So I'm a morning writer. I am not so much a plotter. I will sit down and I think about some of the major plot points that I know I need to hit in the book, and I always know where I'm going to end up at the end. But, I just started actually writing the next story in this series this morning or yesterday. And I was talking to the person who's helping me plot. And I said, okay, so we started talking about some stuff. And she goes, what does she do for a living? I said, I have no idea. We're going to find out. I don't know. So I feel like I get to know the characters as the reader does. That's not always a good thing. Sometimes I probably should have a plan in my back pocket, but I don't usually.
Obviously, it has worked for you.
It's working so far. Yeah.
I'm so curious though, because you said before you've now written over 70 books, which, if we do quick math, that's about 6 to 7 books a year. So, to keep at that pace, I'm curious as to how averagely, like, what your word count is for your books, but whether you're doing that every single day, whether there's discipline involved or you're just a really, really quick writer, what do you think really helps with your success of publishing that many books a year?
I'm a quick writer. I've always been quick. I'd rather just get it done, move fast, get it done. And I'm a clean writer. So when it goes to edits, there's usually no rewrites, or it's pretty clean. Every once in a while, they're like, you need to add something here. I'm like, damn it. But for the most part, they're pretty clean. So I don't usually have to ruminate in edits for very long, which is really nice. 6 to 7 books a year is a pace that I can't continue to keep for very long. We are at the 10-year mark and I'm tired. I'm really tired. So I think this year is going to be the last year that I do 3 series at a time. And probably starting next year, we're going to go down to 2. Sorry.
No.
Sorry, everybody.
No, but it's incredible and inspiring, but also I'm really glad that you raise the point that next year you're going to be slowing down, because a lot of people could not keep at that pace for 10 years. So that brings my question to, have you ever suffered from burnout?
Yes. Yeah. The end of last year was quite bad. Like, every day was a struggle at the keyboard. I would just cry as I'm writing. It was horrible. And, thankfully, when I sent it to edits or I sent it to proofreaders and I was like, please tell me this, it doesn't show on the page how much I was struggling. And they assured me that it didn't, that they enjoyed it and it was good. But I never want to be at the point where I was with my job that I quit so easily back in the day. Because this has been my dream since I was a kid. And I have it, but I need to be happy in it, So yeah, I just can't keep that 6 to 7 books a year. I'm hoping to go down to 4, 5. That's still a lot of books.
That's still a lot of books. That's incredible, though. My goodness. When you say obviously you're a clean writer, were you always a clean writer, or is that something that has come in time?
I was always pretty clean in that I never had to go back through and do a ton of rewrites. That's just always been me. But I can honestly say my editor totally earns her keep, because I'm not great with a comma. There are times that she has to kind of move things around in a sentence for me. She's like, that didn't make any sense. Because as you are writing and you're just purging what's coming to you, sometimes there's just a mess on the page. But as far as having to go in and delete a bunch of stuff and rewrite it and restructure, no, nobody's got time for that.
No, especially when you're moving on to the next couple, and that's why we depend on our relationship with our editor as well. I mean, I know I heavily do. So same thing. I'm terrible at grammar. I'm like, please help. Sorry. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a creative writer.
Yes.
I'm curious, because as we said before, USA Today, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, some incredible titles and accomplishments. And so I'd love to hear about when you were first on those lists. But I want to know if there's a more sentimental moment for you of recognition that made you think, wow, I've really done it. I'm here now.
Yeah. So probably the most sentimental moment was, so I was in Boonesboro, Maryland at the Nora Roberts bookstore, and I'd gone there with my mom and a few friends to go to a book signing. Like I was not signing; we were going as readers because Nora is the queen. So we were going as readers, and my mom and I, she and I had been reading Nora Roberts forever, and so we were having a lovely time. And we were in the bookstore, and the manager of the bookstore came over to me and said, "We would like to invite you to come sign next year with Nora." And I had a minor meltdown and cried all over the place. Yeah, being invited to go sign with Nora Roberts was probably one of the crazier moments of my life, for sure. Yeah.
It's that whole, like, when you get to meet your hero sort of thing, isn't it? But then it comes to a new place where, because I've had a similar surreal moment, and then you think, oh my gosh, one, I can't believe I'm standing in front of you. You know, I've looked up to you for so long. You were part of the reason why, you know, I was writing, like, you really inspired me. But then realizing that you're coming somehow to equal ground, that you are being seen as not just a reader, but as the equal, as a writer. And it's like that whole generational thing as well, isn't it? That's
Yeah, it's really incredible. At one point, Corinne Michaels called me the Nora Roberts of our generation. And I was like, all right, I cannot live up to that. Don't put that like it was such a compliment, like what are we talking about? So yeah, no, that was really special. And the first time I hit the USA Today list, I was at a bowling tournament for my ex-husband's kids. And I was sitting by myself on these little bleachers, as they were doing their thing. And I got a text message from a friend of mine, Emily Snow, who is a published author from back in the day. And she said, "Girl, you're on the USA Today list." And it was with my second book. And I got hot. I was like, what? What? And there were other moms in the bleachers. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm on the USA Today list. They didn't care. They're like, what? So yeah, that was that first call with USA Today. And then when I hit the New York Times for the first time, it was with my book, Loving Kara. And it was in January of 2014. So I had been published for just over a year. And my agent actually called to give me that message. And I just sat down and cried. I was like, what is even going on? And each and every time so now it's usually Susan Stoker. She is the queen of letting everybody know if they've hit a list that week. And if I am waiting to hear, I sometimes will text Susan, are you looking? Are you watching? What's going on? Because she seems to have the inside scoop every week. And yeah, it's always a thrill. Always. Yeah. Especially, I mean, it's really sad they have gotten rid of the USA Today list. And so now hitting, really it's just Wall Street Journal that we're in the ring for these days. And it's not an easy list to hit.
Yeah, and can you explain for those who are watching why it's very difficult to hit New York Times opposed to that? Because we know USA has now been taken away or no longer is, which was very random as well. I want to say nobody was expecting that. That was definitely the run underneath the feet. And
Yeah.
Can you explain why it's so difficult to obtain a New York Times as well for those who are watching?
Sure. So New York Times no longer, how do I say this nicely?
How do you say politically correct?
New York Times doesn't necessarily report bestsellers based on book sales, based on unit sales. Nobody really knows exactly how they calculate their list, but speculation would be opinion, and whatever that person who's curating that list wants to put on it. Because I have friends who sell way over and above what some of the other authors who are listing sell, and they are not mentioned on the list. And I'm sorry, but if you hit number one back in the day when USA Today was still a thing, if you hit number one on USA Today and you are not mentioned on New York Times, it means that your New York Times is not really reporting an accurate picture of what was actually sold for the previous week. They've been doing it that way for a while now. And they've made it quite clear that not only do they not want to feature romance books anymore on their list, but they really, indie, if you're indie, you can just forget it. And some of that speculation too goes to New York publishers such as Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Kensington, all of those publishers. They pay a lot of money to the New York Times for advertising. And so sometimes, you can't help but think, well, they paid a lot of money in advertising and now their authors are sitting on the bestsellers list. And that's not taking anything away from those authors, but there's something shady going on in how they calculate their list.
Yeah. Let's talk about traditional publishers, agents, editors, and all the fun stuff that is involved with that. So, how do you manage having multiple contracts and deadlines when it comes to your traditional publishers and then also your own work?
When I'm under contract for New York, that book usually takes preference because I'm under a signed contract to deliver that book on time. And then I'm able to schedule around that my other releases and writing schedule.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for those who are watching who want to either acquire an agent, advice in that sense, and also if they're looking at going traditional publisher, do you have advice for that as well?
Yes. So I don't think that New York publishers will take submissions without it being represented by an agent at this time. So being agented is important. I would, if you have other author friends who have agents, reach out to those people and say, hey, do you have an email address that I can query them to? I also would look at, who some of your favorite authors are and who are they represented by. Go to that agent's website and check out who else they represent. Are they books that are similar in nature to your own? Because it's not going to make any sense if you write romance to reach out to a nonfiction agent. They're just not going to be able to help you. So look into who is relevant in your genre of writing and query them. I don't know I've had my agent for 10 years now, so I don't know what all of the qualifications are for querying, whether they need a sample of your writing or, some agents will want information such as, have you published before? What kind of ranking have you had? What kind of sales have you had? That kind of information.
I think a really great resource for those who are watching is a website called Query Tracker. So it basically has a list of all the agents, sort of what genres, but do narrow down as well. Look into that agent, see if they are appropriate for you, because although they may read fantasy, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily looking at fantasy right now, etc. So I found that's a great resource as well, adding on top of that. So
That's great.
do you have any advice when it comes to publishers? Because for some of us, we don't know what that looks like. So how have you, any tips or tricks?
Publishers are interesting to work with. The good thing is, I will say they don't usually sign anybody that they're not excited to work with. Mm-hmm. So that's encouraging and exciting. I think it's a good idea to know going in that it's unusual for a publisher to put a lot of oomph and push behind PR, and they expect the author to do a lot of that on her own. Not all authors have a budget at the publisher that people like Lucy Score or Colleen Hoover have, where they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on PR and advertising. It does not happen. In fact, that is the exception, not the rule. So that was something that was pretty frustrating for me, was that, you've paid me a decent advance and you've signed me for these books, but you don't want to publicize them hardly at all. And so I was still expected to utilize my own PR people and my own social media to sell books. Also, they move very slow. Publishers move very, very slow. So you may have a deadline of, say, July 15th, but they're not going to publish your book until next July. They're usually a year ahead. So I would get that book in there. Sometimes I didn't get my edits back for 6 months. I've been out of that book world now for 6 months, and I'm expected to now go in and do these edits. Fine. But now 6 months later, they're going to publish the book, and you have to get excited about it again to talk about it so that it sells. They just move at a glacial pace. Always have. I don't think that's going to change. It's not the kind of working relation. I don't mean to make it sound all horrible. I'm sorry if that's what it sounds like, but it's typically not as tight. I never had as tight of a relationship with the editors at the publishing house as what I have with like my own editor that I use and the team that I have for my indie published stuff. It's just, you're way more anonymous in a publishing house because there's so many authors there.
I love this advice because it really helps with expectation as well as going in, because I think a lot of people do step into the expectation that they will be Colleen Hoover the next day. And as you said, that is the exception, and it's just them sussing you out as well in a way to see if you are going to sell them. Maybe next book they'll put a little bit more oomph into it, but it's just gauging what this sounds but who is going to be their star authors, because they want to make money. They're in the industry to make money. So obviously that's why they're going to do the push. I am curious though, when it comes to pen names, so your paranormal romance books, you have kept under your name, which I love. And so it's the old debate as to whether going out on a pen name because it's a different genre or sticking to yours. So what was the factor into your decision to keep it all under one name?
The deciding factor was I had, at the time, I don't remember, I think I had 6 years of publishing, and I had all of those readers already in my pocket that they read almost anything that I write. Now, I will say paranormal's been really hard for me to sell. And it could be because I did keep my name and I'm known as a contemporary romance author. So I go back and forth on whether or not that was a good idea. I go back and forth on whether or not I should republish everything under a different name. Even if that is making it K Proby versus my entire name. Samantha Young did that with her paranormal as well. She was S Young. And I believe Sawyer Bennett has started doing that as well. But at the time I was like, but my covers are so different. You can tell by the cover, this is not a feel-good contemporary romance novel. Like there's more going on here than that. So I don't know. I think perhaps it was my own stubbornness that I just thought, it's too much work. I don't want to do another pen name. This is what I'm writing. And if you want to read it, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I love that answer. It's so honest because I'm like, again, reflecting on this. So, because I have done the exact same thing. And that's why I'm always curious as to why some people decide to split. And there's no right or wrong in this. And sometimes there's learning lessons, or sometimes it is what it is. And it takes a little bit longer to get momentum on some series as well. So I'm really curious to see what happens for you in the next 12 months when it comes to those particular books as well. But everyone should download them today.
Yes, please do. That would be great.
What is your 3 top marketing must-dos when you have a release coming out? What are the 3 things that you have to have in place?
A nap.
Yeah.
What do we have in place for each book? So I have an ARC team that we send out however many, usually between 50 to 100 ARCs, so that, and they're not influencers, they're readers who love my books and have been with me for a long time, most of them, and love the chance at getting an early copy of a book in exchange for an honest review. And so I feel like that's really important. Having those reviews release week is really important to me. So that's one of them. What else do we do? It's changed so much over the years because we used to do a little party, or we used to, things like those are a waste of time now. My newsletter is really important. So we have to have newsletters set up the week before and the week of release so that my readers know. Algorithms are so fickle. I I was in my own reader group a couple of weeks ago, and I asked the question. It was around the time that Cauldron's Call released. And I said, if you have not yet read my paranormal romance, do you mind if I ask why? It's a no judgment zone. I'm just really curious. And do you know how many people commented with, you write paranormal? In my own reader group. And so I was like, I talk about it all the time, but clearly you're not seeing it in the algorithm. So my newsletter is very, very important to me because that is a captive audience that I don't need an algorithm for that. And I think just having a solid book for people to read is really important.
Do you do ads or anything like that? And if so, what platform?
I do Facebook ads. I don't spend a ton of money. And Facebook ads are another thing that have been changing lately as far as what's working and what's not working and how many people you're reaching. And I'm not convinced the ROI is high enough to continue throwing a lot of money at it. I've never mastered Amazon ads. And that's another area where I feel like you can either make a ton of money from those Amazon ads or you make nothing. There is no in between. And when I've gone to my friends who I know are very successful with their Amazon ads, and I'm like, how are we doing this? And they're happy to help me. Like, it's not like they're like, I'm not giving you my secrets, but they're like, it is a waste right now. You are going to spend so much money per click. That's not even per purchase. You're going to end up spending more money per click than if they had bought that book. So it's so up and down ads are that, I would rather instead, I've hired a person who is so sweet and she helps me with my TikTok because I'm really old and I don't know that much about TikTok. So she is very young and very sweet. And she keeps up with, what's happening over there. And so I would rather do something like that where I know people are paying attention, than just kind of throw money out the window. I always think of that little girl in the black and white, the GIF where she's sitting in the window and she's throwing the money. That's how I feel about ads sometimes. Just throwing the money out.
And I love that you delegate as well if you don't feel strong in something such as TikTok, because it's a hit and miss for everyone. Like, some people are into it, some people are not, and that's okay. I think the painful thing is that we've had to acknowledge that it is such a big thing in our industry right now. I know years ago I had my nose in the air and I was just like, I am not hopping on this. This is not a thing. And now it's turned into a huge thing. So
let's be honest. Colleen Hoover is now one of the 100 most influential people in America, according to Time magazine right now. Really? Thanks to TikTok.
That's incredible. Damn,
yes.
TikTok.
Yes, I know. So I'm like, where are my TikTok readers at? Come on.
I did not know that.
It's amazing. So I'm so proud of her.
Yeah, good on her. Wow. So what is the big goal? What is the dream that you are chasing for your career? The bigger the better.
Movies would be great. We have sold to Passion Flicks. So it would be great to see those come to fruition. But I'd really love a Netflix series based on my paranormal series. I think a serial killer series on Netflix would be amazing. And honestly, my biggest wish is to just do this for another 20 years. If I can maintain what I've been doing for the past 10, I'll be so happy.
I have a segment called Speed Dating with an Author. So you and I are going to go on a very romantic date. I lit a candle, I've created ambience, blush. But basically, what it is five rapid questions. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah.
What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
It probably involves falling at some point. There have been many.
I love that. What are the three words that best describe you?
Driven, happy, hard worker.
Appropriate.
Yeah.
What is the song that best describes you?
Oh, I don't know if I could make it come down to just one because I write and listen to music all day long.
With lyrics or just sound?
Yeah, with lyrics. Mm-hmm. It'd probably be something by Pink. She's my favorite.
Who has been your favorite character to write, and you can only choose one and why? Good luck.
This is horrible. I think my favorite character is Jonas in Hollow's End, because he was born in the 1660s. There's a little bit of a time thing, and gosh, he's really sexy and so smart, and he's very magical, and he can like manipulate fire and stuff. Anyway, he's cool.
He's dreamy.
He's very dreamy. Yeah.
And what is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
I embroider. I do hand stitching.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you like? What are some of the things that you make?
So it's usually just on fabric in a hoop, and then you make the fabric fold back and you can hang it on the wall. So I do a lot of flowers and mountains and trees and things.
Do you share a lot of these like in your Facebook groups and things?
Yeah, and sometimes in my Instagram stories I'll say what I've just finished. Yeah.
That's so cool. Like it's my meditation.
It is. Yeah.
Do you kind of daydream and pants while you're there? Kind of what do I need to do in the next chapter?
A little bit, but mostly I think the reason I do it is because like my brain is pretty empty while I'm doing it. I feel like I can just concentrate on whatever it is I'm stitching, and I'm not thinking about the book, and I'm not thinking about how many books I've sold this week or what, it's more like you said, it's really more meditative.
I have had so much fun today. So, what do we need to know? So, what's coming out? And most importantly, where do we find you?
Well, Chapel Bend is the next thing coming in May. It's a really fun one. I hope you enjoy it. You can find me pretty much everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, the World Wide Web, all the places.
And what was the name of your Facebook group, reader group, for those who want to join?
Oh, it's Proby's Peeps. Everybody's welcome. We have a good time in there. So come on in.
I'm definitely going to join today.
Good.
Well, again, I have had so much fun, and who knows, maybe we'll watch this space and get you on next year if you're available.
I would love that. Yes, I'm in. I had a great time. Thank you.
That'll be awesome. Well, I will talk to you soon. Have a good day, guys. Bye.